SoCal Summer Swing Out podcast. I'm very excited for our wonderful guest here today. We have the lovely Sarah. Hello, Sarah Stembridge.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. I'm just hanging out at home this weekend, so this is a nice little break from all the other stuff I'm doing.
Oh yeah, because you've been traveling a lot, haven't you? Or you've been doing a lot rather.
I move I move a lot. I move around a lot.
Mm.
I have been traveling a lot more lately than I usually do, but I also I feel like I'm always on the move. Um, and it's nice to stay home sometimes. So
Yeah, yeah. Believe it or not, me being an extrovert, I love my solo time. So I get it. Speaking of which, and you moving around and stuff, for those people who don't know, can you give us a quick intro into who Sarah Stembridge is?
yeah, and let me know. I'll just kind of I guess I'll just start. I mean, it's such a complex question, but I I grew up in LA in the San Fernando Valley, born and raised in the San
Oh.
Fernando Valley, and I did a lot of competitive dancing as a child, actually. Mostly tap dance, but I also did like jazz and ballet and stuff like that. Um, and I grew up in a really musical family. My parents
Mm.
both have pretty eclectic taste in music.
Hmm.
But also my extended family is they're all like musical theater people. And um, my grandmother in the 40s like had her own radio show singing on the radio. Her sisters, my great aunts, they were both in musical theater and in opera and stuff like that. So I was always kind of surrounded by music and by musical people and a lot of different styles of music. And so I grew up in that environment, and grew up listening to a lot of jazz music,
Mm.
because of my parents, especially. Um, and when I was a kid, that the Disney cartoon, All the Cats Join In, was
Ah.
just like my absolute favorite thing. I would get so excited when it would come on the TV, and I didn't know what it was, and I never really asked anybody, but I was just like,
Hmm.
I want to do that. I love that.
Mm.
Um, so and then I didn't, except
Uh.
sorry, my cats get really
No, no, no,
they get
it's
really
okay.
jealous. I try I try putting videos on the TV for them to watch.
Oh, it's
But
okay.
they get really jealous, so
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I'll try not to get distracted.
No, 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 no worries.
Um, so um I came to dancing. I mean, I was in middle school in the
Mhm.
late 90s when everything was, the whole kind of revival movement was happening. And so I learned the very, very, very basics of swing dancing then. And, um, but I never did it socially, never ever, until I was 20 years old.
Mm.
And I, I got to this point where I was just like, you know what? I want to do this thing
Mm.
and I've never done it. So I'm going to figure out how to do it. Like where I can go.
Mhm.
And I had a friend who was also kind of a vintage enthusiast.
Mhm.
I mean, I wouldn't have called myself a vintage enthusiast at the time. I still wouldn't call myself that. But I had a friend who was very into, especially World War II history,
Mhm.
especially military history and stuff.
Mm.
And so I called him up and was like, "Hey, I think it was New Year's Eve in it must have been New Year's Eve 2005.
Mhm.
I'm not sure, but I think it was New Year's Eve 2005. And we went to Pasadena Ballroom. I
Oh.
called him up and was just like, there's this dance happening and I want to go and I don't want to go alone. Would you go with me? And so he and I went, and we missed the dance class because we were
Mhm.
late. But we like made friends with people who were there,
Mhm.
and I started um getting together actually with one guy in particular who'd been dancing a long time. He and I would get together and practice. like in the park. We would practice a lot of, I don't want to say aerials, but like, little kind of
Uh,
low low stakes aerials.
as you do when you start out, right?
Yeah. But he and we would get together and practice, and we would go to Lindy Groove every week. And I started taking dance classes at Moore Park College,
Mm,
um, like swing dance classes and ballroom classes, Moore Park College and Pierce College in the Valley. And yeah, that's how I got into dancing. I definitely grew up dancing in the LA scene. I would go to Joe's on Tuesday nights, like before Happy Feet Mondays
hmm.
was around. I would go to Joe's on Tuesday nights for Mark Tortorici's swing nights, and Lindy Groove every week, and then doing classes, and then eventually I was on a team, and so that's that's how it happened.
Man, so you got swing dancing from a bunch of different places, it sounds like, but PBDA was your where you went to your first like social dance?
Yeah, that was my first social dance was PBDA.
Gotcha. And the person who you were practicing aerials with, or like people at PBDA, do you still see them around, or has the pandemic kind of like slowed that down for some people?
So that person, his name was Jonah. Um, and he kind of uh he just kind of eventually just kind of stopped going dancing.
Mm-hmm.
He actually he went to college with Steve Sayer, I think.
Wow.
Yeah, so like we would go to Lindy Groove and like ran into Steve there, and he was like, "Whoa, what are you doing here?" And Steve was like, "What are you doing here?" Um, and so through him, I kind of made friends in the scene. But I don't know, I didn't go to PBDA that regularly. I went to Lindy Groove a lot more often,
Hmm.
probably because, well, I'm gonna guess, but I think it's because at that time I was in my early 20s and I was like
Mm,
hanging out with my friends on the weekends,
right.
and I have I have very close friends who are not dancers.
Mm,
Um, so I think it was easier for me to go dancing during the week, and then like hang out with my non-dance friends on the weekends. But I was going to Lindy Groove every week for
hmm.
sure, and Joe's most weeks. Um, After I turned 21, obviously.
Yeah, obviously.
So yeah, so I don't really remember, other than him, I don't really remember who I might have made connections with at Pasadena Ballroom,
Hmm.
unless they were also going to Lindy Groove.
Mm, gotcha, gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
And all of this was just Lindy Hop, right? You didn't touch any other dance yet.
Not really, not in any real way. So I started dancing, let's say I started dancing in 2006. It was New Year's
Uh-huh.
Eve, so it was 2006 basically.
Yeah.
Um, and I, I was taking ballroom classes and swing dance classes at some local community colleges. And so through those, I was exposed to other styles. I was also on a team, and that was run by the same woman that I was taking classes with at Pierce and Moore Park College.
Oh, okay.
And so she would have other people. She was also like an old school LA dancer.
Mm.
And she would have other people come in and kind of give us lessons. So actually, I took my first Balboa lesson from Sam Chan in
Wow.
probably probably 2007 or 8.
Wow.
And then I did learn collegiate shag, around that time too. But I was I was not super into doing Balboa socially.
Mm.
Um, and at the time, I don't think there was a whole lot of shag happening socially at that
Mm.
time. I don't remember it happening. It definitely wasn't happening in a way that I would have been like passively exposed to it, like nobody, I don't remember ever anyone coming up and being like, "Hey, do you know shag?"
Yeah.
Um, but I did learn it at the
Hmm.
time.
Hmm.
So yeah.
Snap. Okay. So for those listening, if you don't know Sarah, she is a prime example of the SoCal triple threat because you do Lindy Hop, Balboa, and Shag all wonderfully, might I add. Um,
Wow. Thank you. That's nice. Thank you.
of course. And we'll talk about like how that led into Atomic and other stuff. But in terms of like how you started, so you took your first Balboa lesson from Sam and you that's crazy to me. Oh
Yeah.
man. I'm gonna interview him here on at some point because he's probably got a wild story. Um,
Yeah.
but let's see. And then you took like those classes, and now you're no longer in LA. You're down in San Diego, right?
That's correct. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And you brought up a point that I do want to talk about later is like the non-dance friends, because I remember when you and I were talking about Catalina, how you do that every year, and I
Yeah.
that's something I definitely want to touch on, but we'll get to that. So you did all that dancing, and then did you start like traveling and competing around that same time, or when did that come about?
So I started dancing, when I was in my early 20s, and not at that time, but pretty soon after, like I was going to school, I was going to college, and then a few years later, like I moved out. I was living with my mom, and then I moved out of my mom's house. I was always working. I always
Mm,
had I've never, since I was like 16 years old, I've been working. And so at that time I was working in retail,
hmm
and um, eventually I was working full time and going to school basically full time. Most semesters I was taking a full load of classes and going to school full time. Um, so in my early, like when I first started dancing and I didn't have a full time job. Um, I didn't do very much traveling. I think I didn't really know, like I knew, but I was like, oh, I don't know, like I don't know anybody, and I'm like kind of I am a shy person. Like it takes me a little while to kind of feel comfortable in a space.
Yeah,
Less now because because I know that about myself, and so I can just be like, well, I'm just going to be a little uncomfy for a little while, and that's okay.
yeah.
But when I was younger, I was just like, no, I don't want. I'm too scared. But I did go to Camp Hollywood. I think in 2006 was I went to Camp Hollywood, and I did get mono.
You got the sickness after the event.
Yeah, I don't know if it was going around. It wasn't as easy then to track. Like there wasn't like
Yeah.
social media in the way there is now, where people were posting. Like I don't know if there was like an outbreak. Um, and I didn't, it was just because I was so excited. I was taking class. I took like every single class I went to. I would sit in the ballroom and watch the competitions in the afternoons, and I went to the dances, and I stayed all night. And that was also when they had the underground jitterbug championships. I think
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
what
yeah,
was
yeah,
it
yeah,
what
yeah.
it was called.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So it was like, and I was staying at a hotel down the street.
Wow.
So um and just like not eating enough food and touching a lot of people, and like, I mean, by dancing,
Yeah,
let
yeah,
me
no,
clarify
I
that.
get it.
And just not getting enough sleep. And so my first dance camp experience was intense. Like the camp itself was really intense and super, like I was so excited and
Mm,
really just blown away, but also came away from it, get like I got pretty sick.
mm,
And I think that probably had an impact on my, like, not my willingness to travel, but my interest in traveling. But also I was really focused on school.
mm.
Um, and then I was always working, and I always worked in jobs where it was not easy to take time off on the weekends. So
Yeah.
I think that like all those factors contributed to why I didn't do that much traveling early in my dance career.
Mm.
It feels weird calling it a career, but I did eventually uh I had a regular partnership, the dance partnership with Peter Kurtzner,
Mm,
competing together, and we did a little bit more traveling together. Not very much. He did more traveling than I did.
hmm.
Um and that was probably around 2010, I think,
Gotcha. Uh-huh.
when we started when we started uh doing that a little bit more.
Gotcha. And
So, yeah.
do is there like a specific event during that time, apart from like Camp Hollywood, that really stuck out to you?
Yeah, we went to this event. It's so funny. It stands out to me for a number of really important reasons. And I don't want to say they're good or bad, but like it was a really impactful experience.
Mm-hmm.
Um in some great and some hard ways.
Mm.
But we went to this event that used to happen. It was run by Carla Heine, called La Hot Sauce. It was up in
Cool.
San Francisco.
Mm-hmm.
And um and we went to Lone Star, which doesn't happen anymore,
Mm-hmm.
not in the same way. But that was kind of the two big travel events that we went to.
Mm-hmm.
And it was, I think that was really, especially Lone Star was my first time traveling, and traveling pretty far. It was in Austin,
Mm-hmm.
um, and meeting a lot of new people. And we did compete, and I was like freaking out, so so those were two really impactful experiences. And it's a bummer that those events don't happen anymore. At the same
Mm-hmm.
time, things grow and change over time, and it's really cool to see kind of where things shift and how they shift,
Mm-hmm.
and stuff. So, and I'm really glad that I got to go to those events because they don't happen anymore. So,
Yeah, I mean, I remember watching. I haven't heard of what you said it was hot sauce. Was that it?
La Hot Sauce. Yeah.
La Hot Sauce. That's a dope ass name. La Hot Sauce.
Yeah.
And then I've watched videos of Lone Star so much when I was dancing. So that's amazing that you got to go. So like at that point you said you started competing. Do you get nervous when you compete?
Um, so yeah. Yeah, I get really nervous when I compete.
Mm.
I get less nervous now than
Uh-huh.
I used to. I've had I've had a really interesting relationship with competing over the years.
Mm.
Competing was actually this thing that I hated doing it. I
Mm.
wanted to do it and I hated doing it. And I couldn't figure out why I wanted to do it. Like, what was driving me to want to do it
Mm.
when it was so threatening to
Mm.
me. And um over the years, I actually, so I said that La Hot Sauce, that event was really impactful. And part of that was that it was after that event where I stopped dancing for like 5 years. 4 or 5 years. I would go out like twice a year
Mm.
and did not have fun.
Mm.
And so that event, like things that kind of happened at that event that were good and hard, really put me in a position where I kind of had to confront some things that I hadn't even thought about before. And
Mm.
my relationship with competing was a really, not my relationship with competing, actually, was my relationship with myself and my relationship with my own identity as a dancer.
Mm-hmm.
Um and that, like, all of the hard stuff about that was just so heightened in the realm of competitions. So, um let's say if I think of my kind of dance trajectory
Mm-hmm.
before this period of time where I stopped dancing, or basically stopped dancing, and then the time since then, I came back to dancing in like 2016. So it was like
Mm-hmm.
2012 to 2016, I think, where I really took a big break. Before that, I was so like the thought of I was just it's hard to put it into words, but I was it was nothing but threatening. Like even
Mm,
doing well in a competition was extremely threatening to me.
mm, mm-hmm.
Um and I it took me a long time to make sense of that. Now, I've done a lot of kind of self-reflection and thinking through how to change my relationship with dancing so that it's not so threatening. And
Yeah.
I actually used competitions as a tool for doing that because it felt like the most difficult arena.
Mm,
Um, so now I think I do get nervous, but my relationship with my own nervousness
yeah.
is so different. I think before it was so like, what if I don't do well? What if I do well? What if I let down my partner? What if I fall on my ass? Like any of those
Yeah.
things. And now it's so much more like, well, who hasn't fallen on their ass in a competition?
Right.
Like I'm nervous, we're all nervous. So now I have something in common with everyone who's ever competed, not just the people who are competing with me right now.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and my approach is much more, I had to get right with myself. I just really had to get right with myself. And I
Mm-hmm.
had to think a lot about when I took a break from dancing. I read this essay, I guess, an online essay written by Bobby White that was about dance values.
Mm,
And it resonated with me and had such an impact on me because I wasn't having fun dancing because I felt like the only way for me to, like, I was really focused on pleasing the people that I was dancing with.
mm-hmm.
And it started to feel contradictory to what I got, pleasure from within the
Mm-hmm.
dance. And I felt like I had to completely sublimate that in order to please the person that I was dancing with. And I read this article, this piece about dance values, and I was just like, oh, I can think about this in a totally different way.
Mm-hmm.
And it's okay. And kind of got to a point where I was like, it's okay if people don't like dancing with me.
Mm,
And that was like mind blowing for me, like that was a huge shift.
yeah.
And then, um, so the way I think about that with competing now is that when I go out to do a competition, I just have a much clearer sense of who I am
Mm-hmm.
and what my values are and why I'm doing the competition. So if I'm nervous, it's okay because my only goal is just to dance like myself, and to
Mm-hmm.
be able to go out there and say like, hey, here I have a voice. I have a voice and I'm going to use it. I actually want to really quickly do a little shout out to Andrew Jose
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
because he was one of the people who um there was a time, I think it was when I had come back to dancing, and Andrew was like, I think he was just saying like, I'm really glad to see you out dancing again. And he was like, like in this conversation, he was just like, you have a voice and you should use it, and I was like, oh, wow,
Mm,
thank you. And like, yeah, that that is something that I want to kind of incorporate into my own thinking about not just my own dancing, but other people's dancing too.
yeah.
That was a long answer to the question of do I get nervous? But
No, no, no. That was this is gold to me because the concept of dance values and competitions, I'm sure that there are people listening right now who maybe have never competed before or who are competing right now, and maybe they're having this intersection or this block of saying, "Oh, I don't feel good about my dancing because I'm trying to please my partner, please the judges. I need to look a certain way, you know? And I think what you said
Yeah.
would probably really resonate with them.
Well, I think too, I had to get right with myself and figuring out my own values, but I also think for for some people, like on the spectrum of dance values, if that's a spectrum, like whatever, among what everybody might prioritize in their own dancing,
Mm-hmm.
I think that it is valid. Like some people really do want to go out there and they want to win the competition, like they're real competitors.
Mm-hmm.
And that's totally valid,
Mm-hmm.
but I think what was so important for me was being able to just fully stand in my own self and to say,
Mm-hmm.
like, I can appreciate and respect that my values are not necessarily the same as everyone else's values or their priorities,
Mm-hmm.
including other competitors and the judges,
Mm-hmm.
and that's okay. And so I think you're right that I mean, I know you're right because I've had conversations with people who will say, like, well, I don't think my dancing is ready for a competition, or I don't feel good enough about my dancing in order to. I mean, they don't say this, but I feel like what they're saying is like, I don't feel good enough for my sense of self to survive not doing well in a
Mm-hmm.
competition, like,
Yes.
um, and I it resonates with me. I relate to that so strongly because I feel like that's where I was. Um, and it's a hard place to be. I think it's a really hard place to be because I don't know, it just like makes everything so sensitive. Everything is so risky, you know?
Yeah. And
Um,
yeah. Sorry, keep going.
no, no, I think it's just had conversations, especially lately in the last year, where people like I don't want to encourage anybody to do anything that they don't want to do, So I'll have conversations with people where they're like, "Oh, I don't want to compete for this reason and that reason." And I want to say, "Well, if you don't want to compete, that's fine." Like
Mhm.
I think that maybe as a community, we sometimes get a little obsessed with competitions.
Helps.
Like,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, competitions kind of carry a lot of weight, and it's for good reason. But I think that there's so much value, um, and there's so much to get out of the dance by participating in it in a variety of ways, including
Mm-hmm.
not competing.
Mm-hmm.
And it's okay to not compete. I think that it's it's I don't know. I feel like people face a lot of pressure to compete.
Yeah.
But to me, I think like if it's not if it doesn't align with your values to do that or your desires, it's totally okay. I think that I actually listened to your interview with Amy, and she was talking about how her sister asked her if she was doing things from a place of fear.
Mm-hmm.
And that's I think that's the real question, right? If somebody is
Mm-hmm.
like, "Well, I don't want to do
Yeah.
a competition because I'm afraid of, not doing well,"
Mm-hmm.
then, and that's fine. Like if somebody wants to make a decision that way, that's totally fine. But I also want for people, for dancers, to be able to like have a sense of what their voice is and what their contribution is and where they are coming from and knowing that they have something to contribute to the community.
Oh, 150%. Especially because when you're a newer dancer or maybe you just started, and especially if you learn in SoCal, it's not normal to have like the caliber of dancers that we have in SoCal all over the country. And so they see all these good people that are competing and so they're like, oh, I'm not good enough. But I think that what you said is so, so true, that hits the nail on the head, is like you have a voice and competing, you don't have to compete to be part of the community. Competing, the way that
Yeah.
Amy and I see it, is we get to dance as opposed to be sitting down. Like it's so rudimentary and silly, but for us, that's something that is one of, well, I wouldn't say it's one of our core values, but it very much aligns with the concept of like having your voice, and your voice is valid. Your perception of competition is valid. And the way that you explained it was just chef's kiss right there.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Um, sorry if I'm sorry if I'm going sorry if I'm going off too much.
No, no, no. This is good. This is what a podcast is for. So picking back up at what you were mentioning about competitions and having your voice, I feel like that will maybe tie into like the message for the question at the end, potentially.
Okay,
But
sure.
I'm curious. You mentioned Andrew Jose.
Mhm.
You both did extremely well this past year at Camp Hollywood, if I remember correctly.
Well, first of all, Andrew always does well.
That's also true. That's also very true.
Um, but yeah, I think we were both um pleased and surprised. But really, you know, pleased, and we would have been pleased regardless because, you know, how we feel about a competition. I think that this is the same for Andrew and for me, that how we feel about a competition is not dependent on the outcome of the competition.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, but yes, we did get some additional validation.
That's a beautiful way to put it. Some additional validation. So, funny story. Amy and I kind of took a page out of that book that you had mentioned, where you and Andrew said how we feel about the competition is separate from the outcome, right?
Mhm.
So her older sister actually told her about this concept of it would be nice. And so we approach every competition with, oh, it would be nice if we made finals, but if we don't, we'll be happy with what we put out there. And it's so nice to hear other competitors, and competitors that are such high caliber, such as you and Andrew, like approach it that same way. Because some sometimes competitions can be very like sometimes it can ruin your night if you put too much weight on it.
Yeah.
It sounds like you've
Yeah.
had that experience.
Yeah.
Mm,
Um, you say ruin your night, but it ruined more than my night most of the time. It actually like cost me relationships, like
mm,
friendships,
mm-hmm,
dance partnerships,
mm-hmm,
stuff that I felt like, I mean, it's more complicated than that, but um it was so, I don't want to get too deep into my own psychology about it, but like I actually something that was really helpful to me, and I don't know if this is helpful to mention, but my I talked to my therapist about not just dance, but like I just talked to my therapist about stuff because I'm also um I'm in grad school. I've been in grad school for a long time.
mm-hmm,
And grad school is also an environment where things can be very threatening,
mm-hmm,
in terms of like having to make an impression and feeling like you have to be a particular kind of person or a particular kind of scholar, feeling like you're not smart enough all the time.
mm-hmm.
All that just, you know, mess. It's just a mess.
Yeah.
And I was talking to my therapist about it, and I was like, I don't understand why I can sit in a graduate seminar and be totally comfortable with the the possibility, if not the likelihood, that the I'm the stupidest person in the room. And I'm okay with that,
Mm-hmm.
because somebody's got to be the person saying like, "Wait, I don't understand this. Can we talk about this?" You know, um I don't know if maybe that's kind of a not cool way of saying that, but I was just like, in this environment, I am okay with not being good enough, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Um, so why am I not like what's the difference? Like why is dancing so different?
Mm-hmm.
And my therapist recommended this book called Mindset to me, which I listened to, and it was really helpful for me. She was like, it just sounds like you are like you're in a growth mindset when it comes to your academic work, and you're in a fixed mindset when it comes to your dancing. Um, and so maybe that is the focus. Or like maybe that's the framework that you can use for kind of thinking through these things. And that was
Mm-hmm.
really, really helpful for me. Um, and so when I'm competing now, I've done all this pre-work of like, okay, I have a clear sense of who I am, of what my goals are. I think I have a pretty clear sense of my uh, strengths and my limitations or the things that I'm working on. I'm
Mm-hmm.
also entirely, well, I shouldn't say entirely because sometimes like this is always a work in progress,
Yeah.
but I am I am accepting of the idea that I have limitations that I'm not aware of.
Mm.
Um, and so I can kind of go into a competition, and for me, I think that I actually think I don't even I don't know that I have the conscious thought like it would be nice to
Mm.
make finals.
Mm.
Um, except in conversation, like if I'm in a strictly with someone and we really feel like we have something we want to showcase, like this was actually really important um to me at Camp Hollywood for the Shag strictly
Mm-hmm.
because I care so much about Shag, but also because I, I Jeremy Cook and I competed together, and we feel like we have a voice that is not as showcased
Mm-hmm.
in the Shag competition
Mm-hmm.
at Camp Hollywood. And so we were like, you know, it would be nice to make finals so that this style of Shag that we are doing can have a little bit of space, in the
Mm-hmm.
finals. Um, so yeah, and it is really, it's been so, I mean, you talk about being in Southern California,
Mm-hmm.
and I feel like I can understand, I mean, I can recognize how lucky we are
Mm-hmm.
to be here, to be surrounded by the caliber of dancer, and not just a handful, but like there are so many incredible dancers in Southern California, and there are incredible dancers all over the place, but like
Mm-hmm.
we have such a wealth of incredible dancers.
Yeah.
And in addition to that, it's not just that they are incredible at what they do, like in terms of their skill,
Yeah.
but for me, what's been so it's been so expansive, I think, in my dancing, in my relationship with my dancing, in my relationship with the community,
Yeah.
is to work with and talk with people who do have that mindset of like, well, you know, how we feel about the competition is not necessarily based on whether or not we get a medal or something,
Right.
but also who know themselves, who know what they're working towards, who know what their goals are, even if their goal is to get a medal. Like they
Mm-hmm.
know that,
Mm-hmm.
And that's really, really incredible. And I think that part of what really changed that for me was having the opportunity to work with Grace and Blake.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I feel like, am I name dropping too much? I feel like I'm
No, no,
calling
no.
out
Name drop
a
all you
lot of
want. They're
people.
gonna be on this podcast too.
But like the way that they and the way that they think about dancing, the way they think about competitions, the way they think about the community as it exists currently, the way they think about the history of the dance, like all of those things were really inspiring to me. And actually, speaking of competitions, because I traveled with them to Hot Rhythm last year when we did
Mhm.
our Hoist the Colors performance.
Mhm.
And I was going with this group of incredible dancers who were all very successful in
Mhm.
competitions. And I was like, well, I've already made this decision that I'm going to push myself to change my relationship with my dancing, and I'm going to use competitions to do that. But
Mm.
how am I going to feel if I'm traveling with this group of dancers and they all make finals and I don't? You know,
Mhm.
like
Mhm.
I like was really having to confront that. And um if I can name drop again, Ashley Peretta
Yeah.
was I was talking with her. She's also an incredible dancer, but just like so thoughtful.
Mm.
Um, and also a person who's like really, really solid in herself. I just feel so lucky to have so much positive influence around
Yeah.
me. Um, yeah. And I was talking with her about, because we have talked about dance values, and we had talked about like dance values specifically relating to competitions. And I was like,
Mhm.
you know, Ashley, I need some advice. Like I'm kind of facing this decision. I'm not sure what to do. I'm feeling very my anxiety is like putting me into this future where the outcome is rough,
Yeah.
and I'm not sure how I'm going to feel about it. And she really talked me through it, and gave me some really really solid advice for, you know, when I say like I have to get right with myself, like Ashley really helped me get right with myself in that moment.
Mhm.
Um so yeah, it's just we're so lucky. We're so lucky to be surrounded by not just the caliber of dancer, but like people who are so thoughtful and so, you know, diligent when
Mm.
it comes to their dancing. So
Yeah, and we are very lucky to have that group. Now, I was typing for a quick second, but you mentioned a book called Mindset. Is it Mindset: The New Psychology of Success by Carol Dweck?
I think that sounds right. Yeah,
Okay.
I should have thought of this ahead of time and looked it up, but I
No.
think that is right.
Okay. Yeah, no worries, no worries. I made a quick note of that. I'll make sure to include that in the description in case anyone wants to think more about it. Now, we did talk about like the psychology of competitions and the psychology of dance values and how we are surrounded by really, really good people, not just like good dancers, but good people who are aware of what their goals are. I think
Yeah.
I talked about competitions with my podcast with Nick Cruikshank, but the idea I think the idea that we're all in agreement here is wanting to get first place or wanting to win a competition is valid. It's not demonized or bad. I think that for some people, such as myself, Amy, and it sounds like you as well, Sarah, is we put more emphasis on how we feel about the dance outside of what the outcome is, so that the outcome of that competition does not impact us on a negative emotional or psychological level. Would you say that's accurate?
Yeah, yeah. And I think, you know, to me it's like there's space for that, having that relationship to competitions. There is space for that. And for me it's just like it's not how I approach competitions.
Mm-hmm.
But I certainly, you know, I would hesitate to say that one is better or worse. I think if your goal is to win first place and you have a strategy for winning first place, then you're achieving your goal, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Um, I do want to say though that I don't really have anything concrete to say about it, but I just want to add that something I think a lot about, you know, obviously I think a lot about my own relationship with my dancing and
Mm-hmm.
my relationship with other dancers, with competing, you know, all of that stuff. But I also think a lot about the bigger picture, you know, and
Mm-hmm.
how so I don't have any answers, but I do think about questions like, well, how does approaching a competition in one way or the other impact the broader trajectory of the dance or of the dance community? How
Mm-hmm.
does this relate to the history of the dance? Like, are we doing these things out of with a sense of of respect, you know, and a sense of, you know, that even though dancing is very personal, it doesn't like belong to any one person, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
Um, and so like thinking about the outcomes, the kind of broader impacts of those things, I think is really important to me too. And I do think that approaching a competition, um, like if everybody was approaching the competition with the explicit goal of like winning first place, that's going to change how people approach their dancing in the competition, like how they plan for the competition, what they do in the competition, and
Hmm.
what people do in competitions does have an impact on the community because people watch competition videos and they get inspired by competition videos, and it's really
Yeah.
really cool. But I do think that we all, in addition to like having that kind of personal journey, I think we have a responsibility also. Like we're putting ourselves out there, but we're also, I think we have to do that with some awareness of
Yeah.
what we're doing.
Yeah. 150%. Like I've thought about it from like a personal standpoint of I like the way I approach competitions right now. It's healthy for me. It's healthy for Amy and I.
Yeah,
I also thought
yeah,
about, okay, we could turn it on. We could be like, all right, we want first place. But then like I thought about it and I was like, I don't even just saying that just it's like I'm conflicting myself. I'm fighting against myself. And so it's a lot more natural for me.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think too, you know, any of us who, when you compete enough, you know that like judges also have different values, you know, and they look for different things. This is not
Yep.
like a codified, you know, dance. Like
Yeah.
there is a lot of subjective uh stuff that goes into that impacts the outcome of competitions, which is very
Mhm.
liberating, really, you know, like I think that when I talk to people and they're like, my dancing's not good enough for a competition, I always want to be like, I just I don't think that's like a real direct relationship between, you know, like how do you even measure anyway? All I'm trying to say is that if you have the goal, like if your goal is to get first place and you're going to be really like strategic about that, it's going to mean that you will kind of need to have a sense of like what the judges will be looking for,
Mm-hmm.
and and dance accordingly, you know?
Yeah.
And I think that for some of us, for some people that's like so they can they some like I am in awe of people who go out and they compete consistently and they win consistently, and you know, they know who they are and they know what their goals are, and they are really really successful, and it's really incredible to watch. Um and I think for me, and it sounds like maybe for you, it's just more comfortable to approach a competition just being like, I'm just not going to worry about what the judges are, you know, like if we don't have an alignment of values, or if like if they don't like my dancing, if that's just flat out it, they do not like my dancing,
Mm-hmm.
that's okay. I'm going to survive, you know,
Yes.
like, and I'm still going to love dancing, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
still going to try my best, you know, and that is totally okay. I mean, I guess anyone who competes regularly kind of has to, you just kind of have to be okay with that sometimes things are not going to go your way.
Yeah.
And some of us are very practiced at things just, you know, being whatever they are, so if
Yeah.
that makes sense.
Yeah. I very much resonate with what you said about judges not being there because the way that I approached it was I focus on my partner first, make sure that one of my dance values, actually, Jet and I have one of these dance values in common. We want to be comfortable. So if I'm dancing with my partner, even if it is like a competition, I still want my partner to be comfortable and not feel like I'm manhandling them or something like that, or like forcing them to go somewhere. And then I think about the
So
music.
you mean Sorry, when you say you want to be comfortable, you mean you want dancing with you to feel like a comfortable experience for the person that you're dancing with?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay. Yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah.
And I definitely want it to be fun. The worst thing that could happen to me in a competition is if I left the competition and my partner and I were just like, that was terrible. We absolutely sucked. And that would be like my worst nightmare because
Oh no.
I know, because like even if I fall on my ass, I believe that if something were to happen, where if Amy were to fall or if I were to fall, I would fall with Amy. Like if she fell down, I would fall down right next to her. Or if I fell down, she would do something cute to distract people and I get back up, you know? And like I know
Yeah.
that no matter what, I have very strong faith that I'll come out of it with like, oh, that was, yeah, we made it work and we still had fun at the end of the day. Um,
Yeah. I think that and having that kind of spirit in
mm,
a competition is really, really important. I think it's really important. And I do think that is, like this is a collaborative experience,
yes.
dancing,
Yeah.
social dancing,
Yeah.
So, um, and you really see that collaboration and cooperation, and not just cooperation in terms of like, can we execute these moves that we've practiced, but really like when you can see the connection,
Mm, mm,
um, it's just so beautiful. And like, even when things
mm.
go a little sideways, it's like,
Yeah.
dang, it's like that connection itself is so inspiring to me.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's important to have that represented
I agree.
on
So
the
if,
competition floor.
yeah, so if anyone here, I think Daphne, she's just coming back to dancing now, but she had come up to us and asked us about like our partnership and um how we view competition and stuff because I think she's interested in it. So Daphne, this is a
Mm.
shout out to you. Hopefully you enjoy this episode of all psychology of competing. That's essentially what this episode turned into, is like, what is the psychology behind competition? Um,
It's so funny because I'm sorry, I'm like, I feel like I'm talking so much about competitions, and I also am like, I guess I'm just, like competing is just this thing, that like
yes.
it's very prevalent in my life right now. But in over the whole course of my dancing, like my relationship with competing has just been so off and on. And right now
Mm-hmm.
it's on,
Mm-hmm.
so I guess it's I don't mean to I said at the earlier in the beginning, like, well, competing isn't everything.
Mm-hmm.
And now I'm like only talking about competing.
Well, no, like it's an important topic because I think we bring up a lot of mental health and emotional health things that are connected to competing, right? And that's very close to my heart because I really care about the spirit that comes in a dance. And I feel like you also care about that as well as the self-awareness. That's a big word that I connected there, is the self-awareness. Because funny story, we didn't talk about this, but when you and I first met and when we started dancing, we started chatting, I remember at one point I was like, oh wow, you're an amazing dancer, do you compete? And you're like, oh no, I don't do that anymore. And then like this past year you went on to do so well, and I would say that I could see what you're saying now. I could see like how you change your perspective of competition or your relationship to competitions and your dancing. And I just gotta say, like, that is so inspiring to like see someone like, face that difficulty or face that the way Amy's sister said it, face that quote unquote fear, I guess you could say, right? Because it's hard.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Yeah, and thank you. That's really very sweet, very nice of you to say. And I will say, like, my conversation with my therapist when I was like, okay, I'm going to work on changing my relationship with dancing, changing my relationship with myself, and I'm going to use competitions as a means of doing that. That happened in 2020. My goal for 2020 was to do as many competitions as I could
Mm-hmm.
and just put myself out there,
Mm-hmm.
and like work on my relationship with myself by doing competitions. And I did that at Hot Rhythm
Mm,
in February of 2020. And then obviously there were no more opportunities to do that.
yes, the panini happened.
um, yeah, yeah. Except by, like submitting to like virtual competitions, which I um I didn't really want to do that. I felt like wasn't it wasn't the same kind of environment that I wanted to be in order to push myself in this way.
Yeah.
But also I live alone, so I
Mm,
didn't have that many opportunities to work with people when those virtual events were happening. Um, but yeah, it's so funny. I don't remember having that conversation where I said like, no, I don't really compete much anymore. Although I didn't. I guess you and I met in, was it 2021 when we met?
yeah, I remember the first time I met you very vividly.
You
Yeah.
do?
Oh, I didn't tell you? Okay, I have to tell you now because
Okay.
it was at a Friday night and um it was later on in the night and I had seen you dance before and I was like, oh my gosh, she's so good. I'm so nervous to ask her to ask her to dance. I was like so scared.
Oh no.
And then I finally was like, all right, I'm new here. I'm just gonna do it. And so I asked you to dance and you were so nice. You're like, oh yeah, for sure. And then we started dancing and immediately I could feel your connection was just like it was so nice. And then our dance was so cool. And you did this thing because we talked about it in the past where like you looked in my eyes, right? As well as you're dancing. And not many people do that. It's like you and Izzy, and then like maybe a couple of people. You looked into my eyes, and I think you said you do that so that you're not just like staring everywhere, but like you make that initial connection with your partner, right? But I remember that very
Yeah, yeah.
vividly as like the first time I met you, and it was such a fun dance. I always look back to it like, Sarah, she's great. She's great.
I feel like we always have fun dances together.
I
Um,
agree.
and I think it's, like uh like I said, I had to come to terms with the fact at one point that like not everybody's gonna like dancing with me, and that is fine.
Hmm.
Um, but I think that the people that I really get a lot of enjoyment, like it just lights me up to dance
Yeah.
with people who do have that kind of connection where like I feel like I can always tell where you are in space, you
Hmm.
know? And I feel like it enables me to communicate with you where I am in space so that when we
Hmm.
have ideas, like there's this really mutual kind of, uh, I don't want to say talking, but like talking, like
Yeah, conversation.
talking and listening. Yeah, it really feels very conversational. Um, in a way, like that is just my favorite thing. And also like my ultimate my ultimate value in dancing is playfulness.
Oh,
And I
yes.
feel like you and I, um yeah, I just feel like there's a lot of opportunity for playfulness when we dance. So it's very enjoyable to me.
Yeah, I very much agree. Oh man, I was just looking at the time and we were talking about that. Okay. I did also want to talk about one important piece though, going back to like
Okay.
Catalina Island and like friends and stuff because you are so as far as swing dancing goes, swing dancing is amazing. I love it. I think it's great and it is something that I'll do for the rest of my life. It's also not
Hmm.
the only thing in my life and I have other
Yeah.
friends and other hobbies outside of that. And so I was curious, like you have this group of friends that are very important to you that you've been close with for years. How do you
Yeah.
balance like that dance life and dance friends and then like these other friends that you have? Because I'm sure other people might be thinking the same.
Yeah. So, I will, this is okay. So, this group of friends that I've had, we've been friends. We went to school together since kindergarten.
Mm-hmm.
So, I have been very good friends with them for like 32, 33 years.
Mm.
Um, And our friendship, you know, has kind of like gone through a lot of phases, but we were always close friends. And there's six of us
Mm-hmm.
total. And when we were teenagers, we started going to Catalina together every summer with our mom. So we do a mother-daughter trip to
Mm-hmm.
Catalina every year.
Mm-hmm.
So I've known these people my whole life. They
Mm-hmm.
are absolutely my family. And it's really incredible because most of them don't live in LA anymore. My friend Sarah lives in Long Beach. My friend Nicole lives in Playa del Rey, and I live in San Diego.
Mm-hmm.
But my friend Lizzie, she moved to Seattle many years ago. My friend Sasha was in New York, and now she's in Paris. My friend Casey lives out in Bishop, out near Mammoth. So we're really spread out. And we also have really different interests. Like Casey is really, she went to school for photography. She's a yoga instructor. She does acro yoga. She's a rock climber.
Mm-hmm.
You know, she's just like this total outdoorsy person.
Yeah.
Um, you know, Sarah is a career counselor. Nicole is an educator and a poet. You know, like we just have all these like
Yeah.
really different interests, and there's a lot of overlap. We're all educators in some way. You know,
Mm-hmm.
like we all care about helping people
Yeah.
in one way or another, working with people in one way or another. Um, and we just have this really beautiful friendship where we can like fully invest in the other person, even though our interests might become more kind of disparate over
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
Um, and we can go long stretches without like talking to each other,
Mm-hmm.
and it doesn't feel any different, but we're also kind of in almost constant, or let's say consistent contact,
Mm.
you know, with social media. During the pandemic, we were doing Zoom hangouts every Friday night. We would hang out on Zoom
Mm.
together, and that was really lovely. And um, yeah, so I think, I mean, your question is like, how do you balance it? And I guess I feel like in a lot of ways with them, I don't have to balance it. We just are like, they will never not be in my life
Mm-hmm.
until the end of our lives. You know, like they will
Mm-hmm.
never not be in my life. And I just know that. And so, and that doesn't make me take them for granted, but it means that they don't feel possessive of my time. I don't feel possessive of their time. You know, we can
Yeah.
just kind of love and support each other. Um, and actually, you know, I feel like I I didn't really develop very many close friendships with other dancers
Mm-hmm.
until pretty recently. Maybe until I came back to dancing in like 2016. Before that, I
Mm-hmm.
had a few close relationships with a few
Yeah.
dancers, but I had I have so many like really deep close friendships in my life that um I don't know, it's not that I wasn't interested in getting to know people. I think it was just that I would dance with people, and I am quite introverted, you know, and so
Mm-hmm.
socializing a lot, especially in a space where it's loud, and I can't hear very well, and you know, whatever. Um, I don't know. I just felt like I feel like if anything, my relationship with other dancers, I don't want to say suffered, but like I didn't really take advantage of the community, or like I didn't really
Mm-hmm.
integrate into the community for a long time, I think, in terms
Mm-hmm.
of my social connections.
Yeah.
Um, because I just have like a very full, like a life full of love, you know, and I'm
Yeah.
like very lucky in that way. Um, and yeah, I don't know. They're all they're just the best. I just love them so much. They're the best. They're my whole heart.
Aw. I do have to say that
So
like dancing is an interesting thing because I was talking to a friend and they said they like dancing because they're very introverted and they get to do their peopling slash socializing and dancing. But then after that, they know that they're not obligated to keep in touch with that dancer until they see them again at the next social thing. And I think that that's a nice thing about swing dancing is like you get all the good happy feelings, because typically when you go to a dance everyone's all like happy and it's like a little paradise for 1 or 2 nights out of the week, right? I do see that
Yeah.
like some of my friendships have gotten some of my the people who I consider like really close friends who are not dancers. I still have really good friendships with them, but I found that some of my dance friends went into that group of non-dancers because I know that I can call said person and say, "Hey, do you want to get some food? Hey, do you want to go watch a movie? Do you want to go for a walk or a hike or something?" Doing anything that's not dance related. Like that's how I know that, oh, this friendship supersedes dancing. Like it's more than that. And I think that's a beautiful thing. Speaking of friendships, we talked about friendships, events, competitions and stuff, but um as we're starting to wind down, I think we'll go into the 3 questions that I ask everyone. So obviously
Okay.
things are starting to open back up now, events are starting to come back. I'm curious, what events are you planning to go to for the rest of the year?
Well, I'm having extreme FOMO because I'm missing
That
most
is.
events.
Mm-hmm.
I'm definitely going to go to Camp Hollywood, and I mean, after Camp Hollywood, I don't know, but at least between now and Camp Hollywood, I think that's going to have to be it. I did a lot of traveling last year, and I did cowbell and I did hot rhythm, and um, for I kind of just need to focus on other things for a little while. I
Yeah,
have some pressing deadlines coming up. But also, like it's expensive to
it is.
travel and yeah, so
That could
Camp
be,
Hollywood for sure.
yeah. That whole topic of like the financial investment of events.
Oh, don't get me started.
Oh
Don't get me
man.
started because I have a lot to say about that.
Yeah, that could be a lot. I'll do this. This is my first poll. If you would like Sarah and I to sit down again and talk about the financial investments of this whole hobby that we do, please put that in the comments. Send us a DM on Instagram because that would be a very interesting topic. Because I also have some feelings and emotions about that. Um,
Yeah,
but
I didn't mention I mentioned being in grad school, but I
mhm,
didn't mention like I study sociology. I'm a sociologist.
mhm,
So I have a lot of feelings. I have a lot of thoughts and feelings about
mhm,
the reproduction of inequality
mhm.
and how that kind of occurs in the swing dance world. So yeah, I'm gonna say that so that people can know that answering the poll, if they want to answer the poll, just know I'm probably gonna get real obnoxious.
And so, fun story, I studied family science when I was in
Hmm.
undergrad. So I think we're on the same wavelength when it comes to that. Oh,
Yeah.
and that's actually going to play a part into that whole thing. So there may or may not be an event announcement in 2024, maybe.
Oh, okay. I was like, what whole thing are you talking about? But maybe I will hold off on answering that on asking that question until
Oh,
you're
things are
ready.
things are happening in the background. Things are happening in the background. Okay.
Okay.
Now if people were trying to find more information about you and like because we didn't touch on this too much, but you are now on staff at the illustrious Atomic Ballroom.
That is true. I'm extremely honored to get to teach Shag with Jeremy Oth and Nick Williams. I'm
Mm.
just beyond thrilled. I can't even capture it in words what an exciting opportunity it has been. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's absolutely massive and huge. And major congrats to you. So people can find you on the list of instructors there.
They can. I haven't given them like any bio or headshot or anything yet,
Well, you're on
even
staff
though
though,
they
and at some point maybe. Okay.
on staff. I teach the level 2 class with Jeremy and Nick. They alternate each month to month. Um, so yes, I can be found there. Um, and aside from that, I don't have I don't want to say I don't have a social media presence. I do have a social media presence, but I don't have like a dance account.
Yeah.
Um, so I am on Instagram. You can find me just under my name. My handle is srar.
I always like that handle so much. Every time I see it, I'm like, oh, there's Sarah.
Yeah, it's one of my friends when Instagram like first
Yeah.
was a thing. She her name was Laura, and she we would call each other LRAR and SRAR. And
Ah.
I made that my I made that my handle in I don't know 2000 whatever year Instagram started, and I haven't changed it, and I probably never will. But I am on Instagram. I don't post much, but I do get tagged a lot, especially, I mean, Andrew does so much work for posting a lot of dance content. So it's really funny because if you look at my Instagram page, it looks like I am like there's a lot of Balboa on my
Mm.
Instagram page because
Mhm.
it's a lot of Andrew creating content and then including me as like a co collaborator
Collaborator.
or whatever it's
Yeah.
called on Instagram. Yeah. Yeah. So I get tagged more often than anything. And I guess, if people want to find me there, they can. Um, and I don't post a lot of like dance stuff.
Gotcha. Okay.
But I am on there. I am on there. And on Facebook, and on Twitter, but I really don't use Twitter very much except to look at funny things that other people say.
Yes. I am not on Twitter either. Okay. So wrapping up with the final question, it's one I had asked you at the beginning. So what's a message you want to leave for all swing dancers that are listening?
I think that, gosh, it feels like I feel like it's not my place to give a message to all swing dancers. Um, but I think I don't know. I think that I would just love to see the community continue to like we've done so much work, I think, as a community to really confront some of the problematic aspects of the community.
Hmm.
Um, Especially in terms of like the history of the dance and the lack of inclusivity and lack of, spaces being unwelcoming to um especially to Black dancers, but to dancers of color.
Hmm.
And I think that we can continue kind of pushing those conversations. And I think, yeah, I guess I kind of mentioned it already, but I just think that I would like to see people, um, I don't know, like having that sense of like self and having that sense of self-awareness and
Hmm.
kind of knowing who they are and what they contribute to the
Hmm.
community and doing so with like a really serious amount of respect for um where the dance comes from um and kind of how those things, we talked a little bit about like reproducing inequality of all kinds is reproduced all the time, and but just taking those things really seriously, like the
Yeah.
dance is fun. We do this for
Yes.
fun.
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to say like we shouldn't have any fun, but I think that we should take very seriously a sense of that we should have a sense of responsibility, that we're not
Hmm.
just like, oh, I just like, swing dancing because it's this fun activity to do, but it's it it just deserves a lot of respect,
Hmm.
um historically and currently.
Hmm.
And I don't know if that makes sense, but I think that's what I'd what I'd like to impress upon. I think that that's maybe a message more for maybe newer dancers coming into the community, is to, not that I think you need to know the history of the dance before you can start doing the dance, but just
Mhm.
to know your position in the
Mhm.
community, know who
Mhm.
you are coming into the community, and kind of be mindful, aware, of your position in the
Mhm.
community.
Yeah. Yeah, that's powerful.
I I think it's, I say it's for newer dancers. I think it's especially for white dancers. I like, if I can just say that, I think that that is, we've had so many conversations about dancers who are not black doing Lindy Hop, but I think that the conversations are especially pertinent for dancers who are white.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. So I'm glad you brought that up because the episode that right now it's March 25th. So on Wednesday, let me just get my dates right. On Wednesday the 29th, Demetrio's podcast is coming out, and Demetrio and Taylor
oh,
talked
cool.
about this a good amount. So when you all hear this, it'll be past that date. So just go back if you haven't already and listen to what Demetrio and Taylor said, because we talked about some really good stuff about community and being guests in the space and whatnot. So thanks so much for bringing that up, Sarah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really, that is really important to me. And I think especially for people get super stoked on it, and that's really wonderful. But I think that it's very easy to get kind of carried away in your own self when it
Mm-hmm.
comes to, you know, anything that you're excited about. And I really think, like, we are all guests, right? And we
Mm-hmm.
are all, like, we're participants, but we're guests. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that we just need to be really mindful of that.
Yeah,
So
100%. I can't think of another way,
yeah.
another better way to end on, except on that really powerful note right there. But thank you so much for being on here, Sarah. Don't go anywhere after I end the recording. Everyone
All
else,
right.
if you've gotten to this point, thank you so much. Super appreciate you all listening. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram as well as subscribe to us on YouTube. Quick comment about that poll. Put it in the comments if you would like Sarah and I to sit down again and talk the financial investment of swing dancing. I feel like that could be pertinent to a lot of people. I also have some ideas for my event that I'm putting on. And so I think that would be like a live conversation there. So yeah, thank you all so much. Sarah, thanks for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. This was really fun.
Great. I am glad. All right, everyone. Have a good night. Have a good day. Bye. Thank you so much for lending us your ears on the SoCal Summer Podcast. You can follow us on Instagram, Spotify, and subscribe to us on YouTube. We're looking forward to putting out some great episodes for you, and we'll see you on the next one. Bye.